may there be around you, my children, lilacs and nightingales. May your life be a beautiful, sunny lawn, may all the enchantments of heaven fill your souls, and now let me, who am good for nothing, die. It is certain that all this is right. Come, be reasonable, nothing is possible now, I am fully conscious that all is over. And then, last night, I drank that whole jug of water. How good thy husband is, Cassette. Thou art much better off with him than with me. A noise became audible at the door. It was the doctor entering. Good day, and farewell, doctor, said Jean Valjean. Here are my poor children. Marius stepped up to the doctor. He addressed to him only this single word. Monsieur. But his manner of pronouncing it contained a complete question. The doctor replied to the question by an expressive glance. Because things are not agreeable, said Jean Valjean, that is no reason for being unjust towards God. A silence ensued. All breasts were oppressed. Jean Valjean turned to Cassette. He began to gaze at her as though he wished to retain her features for eternity. In the depths of the shadow into which he had already descended, ecstasy was still possible to him when gazing at Cassette. The reflection of that sweet face lighted up his pale visage. The doctor felt of his pulse. Ah! It was you that he wanted, he murmured, looking at Cassette and Marius. And bending down to Marius' ear, he added in a very low voice. Too late. Jean Valjean surveyed the doctor and Marius serenely, almost without ceasing to gaze at Cassette. These barely articulate words were heard to issue from his mouth. It is nothing to die. It is dreadful not to live. All at once he rose to his feet. These accesses of strength are sometimes the sign of the death agony. He walked with a firm step to the wall, thrusting aside Marius and the doctor who tried to help him. Detached from the wall a little copper crucifix which was suspended there, and returned to his seat with all the freedom of movement of perfect health, and said in a loud voice, as he laid the crucifix on the table, Behold the great martyr. Then his chest sank in, his head wavered, as though the intoxication of the tomb were seizing hold upon him. His hands, which rested on his knees, began to press their nails into the stuff of his trousers. Cassette supported his shoulders, and sobbed, and tried to speak to him, but could not. Among the words mingled with that mournful saliva which accompanies tears, they distinguished words like the following. Father, do not leave us. Is it possible that we have found you only to lose you again? It might be said that agony writhes. It goes, comes, advances towards the sepulchre, and returns towards life. There is groping in the action of dying. Jean Valjean rallied after this semi-swoon, shook his brow as though to make the shadows fall away from it and became almost perfectly lucid once more. He took a fold of Cassette's sleeve and kissed it. He is coming back. Doctor, he is coming back, cried Marius. You are good, both of you, said Jean Valjean. I am going to tell you what has caused me pain. What has pained me, Monsieur Pontmercy, is that you have not been willing to touch that money. That money really belongs to your wife. I will explain to you, my children, and for that reason, also, I am glad to see you. Black jet comes from England, white jet comes from Norway. All this is in this paper, which you will read. For bracelets, I invented a way of substituting for slides of soldered sheet iron, slides of iron laid together. It is prettier, better, and less costly. You will understand how much money can be made in that way. So Cassette's fortune is really hers. I give you these details, in order that your mind may be set at rest. The portress had come upstairs and was gazing in at the half-open door. The doctor dismissed her. But he could not prevent this zealous woman from exclaiming to the dying man before she disappeared. Would you like a priest? I have had one, replied Jean Valjean. And with his finger he seemed to indicate a point above his head where one would have said that he saw someone. It is probable, in fact, that the bishop was present at this death agony. Cassette gently slipped a pillow under his loins. Jean Valjean resumed. Have no fear, Monsieur Pontmercy, I adjure you. The 600,000 francs really belong to Cassette. My life will have been wasted if you do not enjoy them. We managed to do very well with those glass goods. We rivaled what is called Berlin jewellery. However, we could not equal the black glass of England. A gross, which contains 1,200 very well cut grains, only costs 3 francs. When a being who is dear to us is on the point of death, we gaze upon him with a look which clings convulsively to him and which would fain hold him back. Cassette gave her hand to Marius, and both, mute with anguish, not knowing what to say to the dying man, stood trembling and despairing before him. Jean Valjean sank moment by moment. He was failing. He was drawing near to the gloomy horizon. His breath had become intermittent. A little rattling interrupted it. He found some difficulty in moving his forearm. His feet had lost all movement, and in proportion as the wretchedness of limb and feebleness of body increased, all the majesty of his soul was displayed and spread over his brow. The light of the unknown world was already visible in his eyes. His face paled and smiled. Life was no longer there, it was something else. His breath sank, his glance grew grander. He was a corpse on which the wings could be felt. He made a sign to Cassette to draw near, then to Marius. The last minute of the last hour had, evidently, arrived. He began to speak to them in a voice so feeble that it seemed to come from a distance, and one would have said that a wall now rose between them and him. Draw near, both of you. I love you dearly. Oh! How good it is to die like this. And thou lovest me also, my Cassette. I knew well that thou still felt friendly towards thy poor old man. How kind it was of thee to place that pillow under my loins. Thou wilt weep for me a little, wilt thou not? Not too much. I do not wish thee to have any real griefs. You must enjoy yourselves a great deal, my children. I forgot to tell you that the profit was greater still on the buckles without tongues than on all the rest. A gross of a dozen dozens cost 10 francs and sold for 60. It really was a good business. So there is no occasion for surprise at the 600,000 francs, Monsieur Pontmercy. It is honest money. You may be rich with a tranquil mind. Thou must have a carriage, a box at the theatres now and then, and handsome ball dresses, my Cassette, and then, thou must give good dinners to thy friends, and be very happy. I was writing to Cassette a while ago. She will find my letter. I bequeath to her the 2 candlesticks which stand on the chimney piece. They are of silver, but to me they are gold, they are diamonds. They change candles which are placed in them into wax tapers. I do not know whether the person who gave them to me is pleased with me yonder on high. I have done what I could. My children, you will not forget that I am a poor man, you will have me buried in the first plot of earth that you find, under a stone to mark the spot. This is my wish. No name on the stone. If Cassette cares to come for a little while now and then, it will give me pleasure. And you too, Monsieur Pontmercy. I must admit that I have not always loved you. I ask your pardon for that. Now she and you form but one for me. I feel very grateful to you. I am sure that you make Cassette happy. If you only knew, Monsieur Pontmercy, her pretty rosy cheeks were my delight. When I saw her in the least pale, I was sad. In the chest of drawers, there is a bank bill for 500 francs. I have not touched it. It is for the poor. Cassette, dost thou see thy little gown yonder on the bed? Dost thou recognize it? That was 10 years ago, however. How time flies! We have been very happy. All is over. Do not weep, my children, I am not going very far, I shall see you from there, you will only have to look at night, and you will see me smile. Cassette, dost thou remember Montfermeil? Thou wert in the forest, thou wert greatly terrified. Dost thou remember how I took hold of the handle of the water bucket? That was the first time that I touched thy poor, little hand. It was so cold. Ah! Your hands were red then, mademoiselle, they are very white now. And the big doll? Dost thou remember? Thou didst call her Catherine. Thou regrettedst not having taken her to the convent. How thou didst make me laugh sometimes, my sweet angel. When it had been raining, thou didst float bits of straw on the gutters, and watch them pass away. One day I gave thee a willow battledore and a shuttlecock with yellow, blue, and green feathers. Thou hast forgotten it? Thou wert roguish so young. Thou didst play. Thou didst put cherries in thy ears. Those are things of the past. The forests through which one has passed with one's child. The trees under which one has strolled, the convents where one has concealed oneself, the games, the hearty laughs of childhood, are shadows. I imagined that all that belonged to me. In that lay my stupidity. Those Thénardiers were wicked. Thou must forgive them. Cosette, the moment has come to tell thee the name of thy mother. She was called Fantine. Remember that name, Fantine. Kneel whenever thou utterest it. She suffered much. She loved thee dearly. She had as much unhappiness as thou hast had happiness. That is the way God apportions things. He is there on high, he sees us all, and he knows what he does in the midst of his great stars. I am on the verge of departure, my children. Love each other well and always. There is nothing else but that in the world. Love for each other. You will think sometimes of the poor old man who died here. Oh my Cosette, it is not my fault, indeed, that I have not seen thee all this time, it cut me to the heart. I went as far as the corner of the street, I must have produced a queer effect on the people who saw me pass, I was like a madman, I once went out without my hat. I no longer see clearly, my children, I had still other things to say, but never mind. Think a little of me. Come still nearer. I die happy. Give me your dear and well-beloved heads, so that I may lay my hands upon them. Cosette and Marius fell on their knees, in despair, suffocating with tears, each beneath one of Jean Valjean's hands. Those august hands no longer moved. He had fallen backwards, the light of the candles illuminated him. His white face looked up to heaven, he allowed Cosette and Marius to cover his hands with kisses. He was dead. The night was starless and extremely dark. No doubt, in the gloom, some immense angel stood erect with wings outspread, awaiting that soul. Darkness.